Good evening, everybody. It is week 5 of BK 141. I can't believe it's already here. We're going to be talking about fruit desserts this week. Of course, first we're going to do some recap for the macaron. We were kind of chatting before class started. We've got some people having, mixed feelings about the macaron. So I want to hear, more about your guys' experience. Of course, we're going to talk about what's going on right now as far as assignments and getting assignments in, reaching out with any questions and everything like that. But before we get into all of that, macarons, who wants to kick it off? What kind of questions? What do you want to chat about? How did last week go for you? We can talk or use the chat, whatever floats your boat.
I had to make them twice.
What do you feel happened the first time around?
The first time what I did is when I mixed the meringue into the dry ingredients, and when I put the first third in, it made like a cornmeal type of consistency, and I couldn't get the lumps out after that.
Okay, sometimes that happens because when you're putting that first third, if it's not quite enough, it will be a little bit too stiff. So if you find that happens, put just a little bit more in to loosen it up just that bit more. And then when you come in with the second third, then you can just kind of gently combine it. But if it does start out a bit too thick, it can kind of be hard to get those lumps out. To just add a little bit more before you move on to like that second third, you know what I mean?
Yep. And then after I baked that first batch, the like the top part, the crunchy cookie part, it's separated from the base. And I used the silicone mat, and I don't know if they were just sticking to it or if they weren't cooked enough. I was like, oh my God, I just ended up throwing them all out.
Oh no, so if your foot does stick a little bit, your batter is a bit too wet. And when you're working with the silicone mats, the moisture doesn't evaporate as well as with like parchment paper does. So if you're finding that, your batter, everything's measured out properly, you're whipping your meringue properly, and it's still just kind of sticking, try how you like it with parchment. Everybody's ovens are a little bit different. If you're in more of like a humid environment, there's going to be a little bit more moisture around in the air. So that foot sticking is from there's still too much moisture in there. This kind of goes into why we age the egg whites, because it does get rid of some of that moisture. Another thing that you can do is like after the first 10 minutes or so in the oven, just kind of like take a wooden spoon and very, very small crack your oven, and it'll just get some of that steam out. And your home oven, it doesn't have it's not like a steam injection oven or anything like that, where it has a ventilation system where the steam can escape. So if you crack it just enough to get that steam out, it will help those cookies to dry out, and then you shouldn't see it stick so much at the end of your bake time.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Let's see, Carmen said that her batter was a little bit runny. They kind of ran into each other. The feet looked great, they're just a little blobby. So if they're running into each other, you overworked the batter. So there's like that fine line between, okay, your macronage stage when you're, combining everything together. If you go a little bit too far, it ends up too loose. So when you do pipe them out, they will spread. So just maybe one or two less of your turn and folds, and it should kind of hold its shape just a little bit better, and then you won't see so much spreading.
Can you add to, like, when you add the vanilla, can you add too much and make it runny but not incorporated enough?
You can add too much flavor, too much color. When you're at your soft peak stage, that's a great time to add if you are adding flavor to the shells, that's a great time to add that, as well as the color. That way you don't like have this perfect meringue, right? And then you go and you fold it just a little bit more or whip it just a little bit more to add in your flavor and your colors, and then you end up with an over whipped meringue. And then the same thing goes for when you're in the macronage stage, is if you wait till then to add the flavor, to add the color, then when you fold that in and it's like, okay, I've got the perfect batter here, but then you give it those couple extra folds, then it ends up going a little bit too far. So it's best to add those things a little bit earlier on in the stage. That way you don't end up overdoing it.
Okay, because I followed the video on when to add the coloring and the stuff after you incorporated it all. And the troubleshooting said if they end up hollow, you didn't deflate the batter enough,
Yes.
but it was runny enough that I thought it was good to go.
I got you. No, that totally makes sense. Macarons are definitely one of those things where it's trial and error. And even when you've been making them for like ever and a day, there's still gonna be that one batch that it's like, what? Like the one before it was perfect. That one's a complete disaster, and then the batch after is perfect as well. It's just one of those crazy things. Wendy, I saw that you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Is it better than to use like a powder color? Because that's what happened to mine. Like I put like a food coloring gel, the gel one, at the when I was whipping the egg white, but I didn't want to over whip my egg white.
You can use
it was giving me like a hard time.
You can definitely use the powder. That's, a lot of chefs like to use the powder. I use gel. You just have to kind of get the hang of when you're adding it in. So like I said, at that soft peak stage is a great time to add it. That way you can continue to whip it just a little bit further and then hit your stiff peak, and then boom, you're pulling it off. And you don't have to continue to mix it too long to incorporate the color. Another thing is if you did whip your meringue to a stiff, instead of incorporating your color with the whisk still, pull it off, just kind of gently like fold in some of the color. And then as you start to add in your dry ingredients, that color will completely disperse through the entire batter. And you don't really so much have to worry about it getting overworked. Anything else? I was seeing some good things. I liked the couple that have come in. I haven't seen a lot of assignments yet. Which if you're having any troubles, please reach out to me. If everything's good and you're able to find everything, cool beans. But if you are having any troubles, just reach out, we'll chat, we'll talk base, and we'll figure it out. But like from the ones that I have looked at so far, really nice coloring going on. I like the colors that are being chosen. Sometimes macarons can be like really, really bright and vibrant, but I don't know, I like to err on kind of the more like gentle side of coloring with those, especially because the more color you add, the more thin your batter is going to become. So when you're kind of just very delicate with that coloring, I like that a lot. I've seen some smooth tops going on. I have seen some that, the macarons didn't quite release, which we just talked about. If your batter is a bit too wet, that's why that's happening. But what I really like is that sometimes when you add color, the color starts to go brown, like if they're baked too long, and I didn't see very much of that. So I think that, you guys are finding like a good bake time. So that's really awesome to see. How can I make white macarons? So you can not use any color, which it'll be a little bit of an off-white, but you can also buy white coloring. And it's just what it says. It will make, if you're making like a white chocolate ganache, but you want it white and not yellow, you would just add some of that white coloring. AmeriColor is a brand that I really like. They're, I think it's called like Super White or something like that. And it'll make your macarons white instead of that, like that off yellowish color. Any other macaron questions? All right, so before we get into week 5, all our fruit dessert and everything, I did want to talk a little bit about, what's going on, right now in the world and everything with coronavirus. Our chefs, everybody at the home office, they've put out this really helpful kind of guide for you guys to have a look at, which I'm going to share with all of you. To just kind of give some ideas of like where to look, where to go if you're having any type of hardships, any type of struggles. There's suggestions here with childcare, talking about groceries, where to shop, maybe what type of services that can be used. Looks like there's some delivery services that are waiving their fees, which you can use. I used Shipt the other day. I have 3 kids. I was like, I'm not going to the store with all of my kids. I used one of these delivery services. I thought it was really helpful. you know, scrolling down through here, reach out to your chef instructors, your success coaches. You've got career services. Everybody's here. Everybody's ready to help. If you do find that you are being impacted, if you find that you're having, like, you know, whatever kind of situations are going on because of this, if you're struggling to find product, to find specific ingredients, reach out to me. I will gladly work with you and find alternatives, alternative ingredients, alternative recipes, whatever we need to do to make sure that you stay on track. Another thing that I know some people are concerned with is as far as like late work and things of that nature. There will be some more kind of, there will be some more information getting sent out in regards to that, some more guidelines there. But if you are in a situation where you are unable to find the product or unable to get the production done for whatever reason, you know, if you're getting affected, again, touch base with me. The key thing here is communication. I just need you guys to talk to me, and then, you know, on a base-to-base situation with each of you, then we can work it out and we can figure it out. So I did just want to let you guys know that. Again, I'll be sending that really helpful guide out to you all. I'll be emailing that after class so you have that on hand. But yeah, just make sure you're touching base. This week we're doing fruit. We're working with some fruits that are pretty much readily available in the stores from what I've seen in my area. So I hope that you have the same situation. But again, if that's not the case, just reach out to me and we'll totally figure you out. Does anybody have any questions on that right now? All right, let's go ahead and dive in to week 4. I keep saying week 5, don't I? It's totally week 4. I'm jumping the gun here. I know it is week 5. Oh, yeah. Come on, guys. You got to keep me. What are you guys doing? Say, chef, what are you talking about? Like, what world are you living in? So it's week 5. I've got week 4 on my presentation. Just ignore me. I'll change it. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about fruit this week. So a couple things about selecting your fruit. You want to make sure that you're not selecting anything underripe, because there's no flavor there, right? When you start cooking things, it's just going to enhance the flavor that's there. And if you're starting with kind of just bland stuff, you're not going to be able to fix that. You can make things sweeter, but you're never really going to be able to bring any more of that natural fruit flavor in. So make sure that you are getting things that are nice and ripe. And then of course, depending on what you're making, you know, if you're making like a jam or a jelly, you can do something a little more overripe, or if you're making like cakes and quick breads and things like that. Whereas if you're using, you know, if you need whole fruit like we are this week, you don't want to get something too overripe because then it's just going to be mushy and like fall apart. So a little bit about your yield and the amount that you're going to need. Does anybody have any experience kind of working with, you know, I know you guys kind of briefly went over, not briefly, but you guys went over that in your math class. Does anybody feel comfortable with those type of like equations, trying to figure out like how much fruit are you going to end up with after you trim it all? Or how much fruit do you need to buy so that you can have enough? Who in here has worked kind of on the job with anything like that? Well, I will show you. And I just found this really handy like whiteboard app that I'm excited to use. So when you are trying to figure out your yield, so the yield after you have trimmed it, after you've got rid of any skin, any seeds, anything like that, that's your edible portion or your EP weight. What you buy from the store is called your AP weight. So let's say each fruit has a yield percentage, right? So let's use bananas, because I know bananas is going to be 70%. So that means that only 70% of your banana you're actually going to be able to eat. So the way to find that, let's say you've got, what, 10 pounds of bananas. So how much fruit are you actually going to be able to eat from that? So what you're going to do is you're going to change your 70% to a decimal by moving 2 spots to the left. So now we've got 0.70, okay? You're gonna take your 10 pounds, you're gonna multiply that by your 0.70, and you're gonna get 7 pounds. So because banana has a 70% yield, your 10 pounds of bananas that you're buying at the store is going to give you 7 pounds of bananas to eat, to use in your product. So let's kind of reverse that. Let's use a different number. Let's say you have a recipe. So we're gonna be working with amount needed now. Let's say you have a recipe that calls for 3 pounds of bananas, okay? So you're gonna do the same thing. You know that your banana yield is 70%. So what you're gonna do here this time is you're gonna have your 3 pounds and you're gonna divide that by your 0.70. Ooh, my writing's terrible on this thing. All right, so you're gonna divide that by your 0.70, which gives you 4.29. So basically, you know that you need to go ahead and buy 4.5 pounds of bananas so that you have that 3 pounds of bananas that you're gonna need to use in your recipe. So it's really important to know this because, you know, if you're working and you're like, oh, I need a pound of bananas, you go to the store and buy a pound of bananas, you're not gonna have enough for your recipe, and that's going to cause a lot of problems. So it's really important to start to learn that math and make sure that you understand, you know, what you buy isn't gonna be what you're using. You need to make sure that you are taking into consideration the peel, the seed, the core, stems. Are you getting rid of any stems? Some fruit have a much higher yield percentage, some are much lower. Like berries is almost 100% because there's not really much on a berry that you're gonna get rid of, right? Whereas, like I said, the banana, gotta get rid of the peel, and then the entire inside you can have. With like apples, you're getting rid of the skin, you're getting, I think oranges and pineapples, again, there's a lot of skin to get rid of, a lot of weight there. You're getting rid of, you know, if you don't want the membrane, if you're doing like a Supreme, something like that. So it's just really important to get yourself comfortable with that type of math. All right, so that's kind of what I wanted to discuss on that point, on the math point. And that way, if you're wondering, well, how much fruit should I buy, chef? Now you know how much, or how to figure out how much fruit you're gonna need to buy. So there's different types of things that we use, you know, fruit for in the pastry world. Like we use it for a lot: jams, jellies, marmalades. You can make confections out of it. Of course, there's baked desserts. This week we're working with poached dessert. So some things to take into consideration is the pectin content in your fruit. Now, pectin is a soluble fiber that's in that fruit, and that's what's going to allow your fruit to gel up for your jams, your jellies, your marmalades. Another one that you'll often see on like a platter of petit fours would be the pâte de fruits. I love these. They're so delicious. They're like firm little gummies. Has anybody ever had them before? They're so good. And as far as a chart goes, Jean, I haven't found the chart in the textbook, but in chapter 22, I believe, when you're looking through all the different fruit, right underneath the description of each type of fruit, it shows the percentage, it shows the yield that you'll get off of that fruit. But I will see if I can find just a handy chart for that. I know that there's definitely a lot of them like online and stuff, but I'll try to find a good one. It's just good to have. It's definitely good to have on hand. So, you know, those are some of the things that you're going to use fruit for. You know, in the pastry shop, we're going to use fruit for sauce, for candies, for desserts itself. Let me pull up here some other things that we'll use fruit for. Who prefers fruit dessert over like a chocolate dessert? How many people here? I'm a chocolate girl. Like you could give me a fruit dessert and I will leave it on the table any day of the week. So some things, Diva, you like the fruit. Man, give me some chocolate. So some things that you probably are used to seeing fruit in would be things like cobbler. Now a cobbler, who uses biscuit dough and who uses like a pastry dough? If you guys have ever made or eaten cobbler, have you seen it with biscuits or like biscuit dough or pastry dough, like pie dough? biscuit, so Francine seam biscuit. So cobbler is kind of named after cobblestones. So traditionally it's made with, just kind of blobs of that biscuit dough because it looks like a little cobbled road. I'm sure there's other stories out there about it, but that's the one that I know. So that's the one that you guys are being told. But it makes sense, right? With the little cobblestones there, but it can also be topped with pie dough as well. It doesn't have to be the biscuit dough. That is just the one that I am most familiar with. So some other things that you're going to use fruit for, you can do a crisp. So that's just going to have like a streusel or a crumble on top. It's generally not going to have a pastry bottom to it. It's just going to be the cooked fruit, which Dimitri says she doesn't like cooked fruit. Totally understand that. It's probably not my favorite thing either. So we are right there together. And then of course we've got pie. Pie is going to have a bottom crust. It's going to have a top crust. It could be lattice, it could be whole. You will also see some pies that don't have a top to them as well. So the key thing here is having that filling, but pie most definitely does have the bottom crust to it. This week, though, we are going to be focusing on poached fruit. So poaching is cooking in a liquid, and it's generally from like 140 to 180. So we know that water boils at 212 Fahrenheit. So a simmer is going to be kind of just below that, kind of in that 180 to 200. And then your poaching temperature is going to be between about 140 to 180. You're not really going to see any bubbles happening in poaching liquid. But when you're starting out your poaching liquid, you do want to bring it to a boil so that you can dissolve all that sugar. It's really key to make sure your sugar is dissolved before you plop your fruit in there and then allow the poaching process to take place. I brought some really pretty pictures that I found of some different poached fruit desserts, because I would love for you guys to plate up your fruit if possible this week. So some components that you want to make sure that you have. You always want to make sure that you have a sauce, a crunch, and then a garnish on the plate. So these were some good examples, I thought. These two here are poached in a wine. This one is actually poached in port wine. It's got like a blue cheese crumble and like a really dark chocolate kind of brownie underneath that. Really interesting flavor profile there. This here, they've taken a caramel sauce, looks like maybe like a pastry cream at the bottom. Got a couple like biscuits going on there. It might even be like a little slip of puff pastry, like a Napoleon. Some ice cream, and then those slices right there, they've taken their pear that they've poached and sliced it and stuck it right under there. So I thought that was quite interesting. That one was really pretty. So yeah, I would really love to see you guys plating up your desserts this week. I have some other plated kind of examples to go over. But definitely you want to make sure that when you're poaching your fruit, some things to remember is to completely have your fruit submerged in your liquid, in your poaching liquid. Now they will float a little bit, they will kind of bob a little bit. So there might be a tiny bit on the top of the fruit that's not like completely under the liquid. But just make sure, use your best judgment, make sure that the fruit is covered. I want to pull up the formula real quick for the week, because I do know that it calls for 1,500 grams of fruit. So if you cannot get that much fruit, all I really need to see is at least one piece of fruit, either a pear, an apple, or a peach poached. So don't feel like you have, if you can't, that's about 1,500 grams. You're looking at about 3 pounds of pears. And that 1,500 grams is referring to after you have peeled, cored, and quartered it. So you would, using that math that we just chatted about, you would figure out how much that you need to buy. But again, I don't need that much fruit. My main thing is making sure that I can see that you've understood the poaching technique. I would like to see it plated up with that crunch factor, your sauce, your garnish, which I have some examples for you, because plating desserts is so much fun.
Chef,
Yes.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Well, I think it was for it was, anyway, early on, one of the classes that I had, we had to do farm to table, and we had to, I poached pears and in wine, and they came out beautiful. I mean, just beautiful. The pictures, everything was great. But what I didn't tell my chef instructor, because I was so embarrassed at the time, was that I put them all in the refrigerator and put the saran wrap over it, called my family, told them, oh, come get some, whatever, whatever. And when I took them out about 2 hours later, and I took the saran wrap off, I mean, it was mush. As soon as I went to cut into them, literally they just collapsed.
Yeah,
And like,
it just kept
how do
soaking
I
in all
keep
the
that
syrup,
from
huh?
happening? Yeah, it was crazy. And all I did was poach them, but they were so beautiful. And how do I keep that from happening this time?
So what I would do is once you poach them, allow them to cool in their syrup, in the liquid, and that way they can really absorb all that flavor and take on that flavor. And then honestly, I wouldn't store them in the syrup. I would just wrap them up. What type of pear did you use as well?
I don't know. I just went to the Walmart and got pears. I don't even know what kind
Sticking
they
with
are.
like a Bartlett, Bosque pears, Bartlett pears, the ones that are going to be a little bit more firm, they will hold up really well to the poaching. If you're getting something that's a little bit more mealy, a little bit more grainy, those ones will kind of just turn into like, pear sauce, like applesauce, pear sauce. But yeah, sticking with a more firm, I love Bartlett pears. They're one of my favorites to use. And then, like I said, when you store it, just pull it out of the syrup. You can reserve some of that syrup off to the side so that you can use it on your plating. But I would just go ahead and stick them in a container and then wrap them up with your cling wrap. They will probably stay for maybe like 3 days, 2-3 days. They don't have a super long shelf life, but you can get a couple days out of them just outside of the syrup so that they don't just keep soaking it in and soaking it in.
Okay. Thank you, Chef.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see. I totally lost track of what I was looking at. Sorry, guys. All right. So, what was I saying before? Hold on. Oh, the dessert, the plated desserts. Let me pull that back up. That way you guys have some ideas of plating and like what to put on the plate and what not to put on the plate. So whenever you're working with a plated dessert, like I said, there's going to be those 4 elements. You're going to have your main component, you're going to have a sauce, like a crunch or a texture, and a garnish. So with the main component, you're looking to be around 3 ounces is generally what you're going to find. It might fluctuate a little bit higher, a little bit less, but don't ever be afraid to play with different shapes. Like we're, always talking to you guys about kind of getting outside of that slice of world. So working with something like this, with the poached fruit, it really allows you to kind of get out of that, like, okay, I need a slice of cake on my plate for it to be a dessert. Because the poached fruit, it can be the main component. It could even be like an accompaniment to the main component. If you were doing, let's say, like a baked tart, where you poached your fruit in some type of syrup, and then you slice that, you put that on top of like a frangipane tart or something, right? Like an almond tart. So it then becomes part of a different dessert. So you could do something like that. Your sauce, some things that pair really well with poached fruit is going to be like creme anglaise. That's always a winner. And we know that we can flavor creme anglaise with, different spices, different aromatics. Which, speaking of aromatics, you want to leave those off of the plate. So I know sometimes you'll see like cinnamon sticks or star anise or something like that. You want to avoid putting that on the plate at all costs, because anything that's on the plate, people are going to try to eat it. Now, could you imagine biting into like a whole stick of cinnamon? It probably wouldn't be very tasty. So just leave it off of the plate. Avoid someone telling you, oh, I got this dessert, it was terrible, that cinnamon stick. Well, we know that they shouldn't have eaten it, but they're not thinking about that. So just don't put it on there. Another big one that you'll see a lot of chefs get really feisty about is mint. If mint does not complement your flavor profile, leave it off. It's a beautiful color, but we can find color in so many other ways. You can pair raspberry with a pear. You can, there's so many different colors that you can bring in to go with your dessert, besides like mint. If you want to bring in those greens, explore different microgreens. Like I adore basil. Basil has a very licorice, anisey flavor to it. So you can bring that in and pair it with an apple easily, pair it with a pear easily. There's all kinds of different other microgreens. Thyme is a really nice one. It goes super lovely with blueberry desserts. So start exploring and seeing what other green things that you can bring in. Also your strawberry tops, right? Leave your strawberry tops off, cut those off, stick them in a salad or something, put them in a smoothie, something like that. So let's jump back over here. So we talked about your main component, your sauce. So a crunch factor. So you can use different crumbles. Maybe you can make like a streusel or something like that. You could even make a cookie and you could crumble that cookie down. That would add great texture. Candied nuts, right? We had we had Sugar Week earlier in the class. You could candy up some nuts and crumble them down. And then your garnish. Sometimes garnish and crunch factor can be one and the same, but sometimes you'll see a garnish that might be something else on the plate, like maybe a sugar, a caramel spiral, or one of those like nut comets. You know, when you dip the nut in the caramel, you let it drip off, it gets that spike. That could be another one. Francine was asking about the herbs. Is parsley a palate cleanser? It is. It cleans the mouth. Another one that does that is licorice, anise, anything like that is another good palate cleanser as well. So your garnish and your crunch, they can be one and the same, but often, you know, they'll be different. Now, sometimes there's not only 4 things on the plate, right? Sometimes we see these desserts and there's so many different items on there. So that's where we kind of start creeping into like those deconstructed desserts and things like that. Really, really on trend right now to have desserts with multiple components, but each one of those components serves a purpose. So I brought up some plates that I thought were, they look like they probably are really difficult to plate, and they look like they're, you know, they might be intimidating. But if you really break it down and look at what's going on the plate, they're actually quite simple. So this first one here, I also wanted to work in fruit. I wanted you guys to kind of see different things that you could do with fruit on a plate. So this first one here is like a pavlova. Is anybody familiar with pavlova? Any pavlova desserts? So it's a meringue. It's from Australia. It's actually named after a ballerina. I can't remember her first name, but her last name is Pavlova, and she came to Australia to put on a performance. This dessert was made in her honor. It's really light, you know, like a ballerina, how they dance their tutu and all of that. So this is kind of like a meringue here. They've baked it as a round and then hollowed it out a little bit. So the inside is going to be really kind of marshmallowy and the outside is super crisp. And then there's just kind of some poached, looks like some poached peaches on top of there. We've got some caramel lace, a little bit of chantilly cream, and then a lime zest. So that lime zest brings in, you know, an extra color. But there's also a sauce going on in there. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Is that a little bit bigger for you guys? Okay. So, you know, there's really nice colors going on here. This next one, they took a tartlet and they cut it into 4 sections and played with shape instead of just putting the one tartlet on the plate and kind of just putting, you know, sauce around there. They broke it down and they broke it into pieces. We've got some crunch factor from the tart base, as well as the nuts is adding in some crunch. And we've got a sauce on the plate. Looks like maybe like a passion fruit sorbet going on there. I'll get this out of the way. And then we've got some type of curd and cream. And then these little tiny edible flowers. I adore using those. I love to use like edible flowers and gold leaf. One might call me bougie, if you will, but I like sparkly desserts. It's so much fun. This one here, so you've got kind of a cake that has been, so if you have like cake scraps, right? Crumble them up, stick them back in the oven, dry them out, and now you have a crunch factor on your plate. We've got this pineapple kind of crisp there. They've probably sliced it super thin, like on a mandolin, and then throw it in a dehydrator. And so you're adding some, again, some crunch there, another color there as well. And then here, this one's a panna cotta with like a fluid gel. So there's another type of sauce there. You take, you basically make a gel. So you take your fruit sauce, your fruit puree, you set it with some agar, and then you blend it, and it turns that gel into now a more fluid state. You could even add a little bit of extra liquid if you needed to. And it's really fun to work with, and it allows you to have a fruit sauce on the plate that is clear. So it's not going to have, kind of that hazy look to it. It's going to be completely clear. And it really packs a punch flavor wise. And it's just something different. It's a different texture. It's something, that people don't really see every day of the week. So those are always fun to work with. And then, we've got a little bit of crumb. You'll often see like a crumble underneath if you're doing like a quenelle of sorbet or ice cream or anything, because it allows it to not move on your plate. It also makes sure it's not like dripping everywhere on your plate. Again, no mint in sight. We've got some sort of microgreen here, a couple little petals from an edible flower. And then this one I think is absolutely gorgeous. Very, very simple. It's literally just panna cotta cream, and it looks like a little bit of some type of graham cracker crust that they've put on there, maybe a strawberry sauce underneath, but it's, it's clean. There's not a lot of components going on there, but it probably looks like it took them like hours to throw together. Anybody have some ideas of what they're wanting to do with their poached fruit this week so far? Or which type of fruit are you wanting to use so far?
I wanted to do something where I can use the chocolate skills and make a butterfly, with the wings and pretty design in the wings. But I have no idea which fruit to do that. I think I would probably make the chocolate butterfly to put on whatever it is. But I don't know which fruit to use to do that yet.
Definitely. I mean, any of those, any of your pears, your apples you can pair that with the chocolate. I saw a lot of you guys kind of interested in those chocolate bowls in the discussion forum. So if you are up for tempering chocolate again and you want to make another bowl, you could place some, maybe some chantilly cream and your poached fruit inside of your bowl. Francine, you could rest one of your little butterflies, right? Kind of perch it on that. Like if you take a pear, right? Poach it whole, cut it in half. And then you just kind of like rest that on your plate, kind of maybe lean it up against something so that it can stand a little bit, and then just perch that butterfly right on top. I think that would draw your eye, up. Having height on a plate is really important. So you kind of you start looking at the center of the plate, and then your eye just draws upwards to, to that butterfly kind of perch right up there. I like that idea a lot. What other ideas do you guys have so far? Well, if you start thinking about things and you're like, I'm not sure if this would go together, ask me. I love plating desserts. It's so much fun. I really enjoy kind of finding unique flavor profiles to put together, or different, flavors that one might think, oh, well, that's kind of weird, but like it works. I love working with that kind of, that those things that kind of make you question, like, does that work? But then you eat it and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, it does. That's really fun for me. I think it's, really cool to be like as innovative as you can when you're plating desserts, because it really does allow you to kind of like bare your soul to your guest. You put yourself on that plate, and it's really fun. I enjoy kind of helping people along and figuring out plating, even dessert menus. When you're building a dessert menu, some things that you want to think about, you want to have a chocolate option, you want to have a fruit option. You might even want to play with temperatures. You might have some hot stuff, you might have something cold on the menu. And then of course now we're working a lot with, different dietary restrictions. So you might have, a gluten-free or a nut-free, which it's really easy to adapt that into like a fruit dessert or something like that. There was one time where if you don't eat any gluten, people just give you a bowl of fruit. Like, we've moved so far past that to where, we're really thinking about each and every person that's going to come through our doors and making sure that we're finding something to cater to each person. So having fruit in different desserts and, highlighting fruit, it allows you to really work with the season. If you are a seasonal restaurant, you're only going to be using what's available at that time. It also allows you to work with local, right? So if you're building your menu off of working with farm to table, you're going to be reaching out to any farmers or farmers markets that are in your area, and you're going to be building that menu based on, what fresh produce can you find. You can use wine, red wine, white wine, doesn't matter. I've got some Chardonnay in the fridge that I'm probably gonna poach like an apple or a pear with or something. If you don't have to use alcohol if you don't have it. If you don't want to use a wine, you can just use just water and sugar. You can also change the amount of sugar in the formula based on how sweet you want your fruit to be. Based on how sweet your fruit is. So if you're working with a fruit that's like the flavor is just phenomenal, right? It's super sweet. It's not going to need as much sugar in the syrup as, say, maybe something that is just kind of lacking in some flavor. Maybe it's just not seasoned. It's not tasting good right now. You might add a little bit more sugar to the syrup. So you can definitely play with that. You can put cinnamon sticks in your syrup, lemon peel, star anise. You can definitely add those, those hints of flavor into your syrup if they're going to work well with the dessert that you want to put together. What other questions do we have about this week's production? Well, I want to, let's see, can you poach fruit and beer? I've never tried it, but go for it. Maybe you can find like a pale ale, like a Belgian white or something that just kind of goes really well with, fruit, like has a fruit base to it. Cause I know that, Blue Moon goes really well with like oranges, pears. You can I'm all about it. If you think it's going to taste yummy, go for it. The key thing is just making sure you have a liquid. So if it's a liquid that you like the flavor of, by all means, use that. I just want to take a browse through the formula real quick. So like I said, you don't have to use this full recipe. It's fine if you cut it down. If you can only get your hands on a little bit of fruit, knock it down, totally fine with that. You're going to combine your liquid, whether it be water, wine, beer in some cases. You're going to combine that with your sugar. Bring it to a boil. Make sure you get all of that sugar dissolved. Add in any type of aromatics. If you're using a vanilla extract here, cinnamon sticks, anything that we just talked about, throw that in there. And then you're going to turn it down. You want to make sure that you turn that temperature down to like probably on low to medium low or so. Put your fruit in there. You want to make sure that the fruit is covered. And depending on the size of your fruit, it could take anywhere from like 35 minutes to something that's a little bit more small. It could take up to an hour. So you just kind of have to, gauge it. If you want to give it a little test, just take like a toothpick, something that's not going to make like a huge mark, and just poke it in there. There shouldn't be any resistance. It should just easily be able to kind of slide in and out. And that's how you'll know that it's ready to go. Turn the heat off. Allow that fruit to cool in the syrup, and then from there you can go ahead and use that. Of course, there is the video on the class page. Take a look at that after class or when you wake up tomorrow before you start production. That way you have that kind of visual of the process. So let's just kind of review and see what we have due this week. Chef Sinead says we've got knowledge and conversion check due. Also your plated fruit dessert and late work. Please, please, please reach out to me if you have any assignments that have not been completed. We are coming up to the end of class. So I do want to make sure that you guys get everything done. I would love to see all late work and by the start of week 6. That way when we get into week 6, we can wrap up cleanly and not be still trying to like catch up with everything. And again, with all, you know, the closures and outages and everything like that, just if you are experiencing any kind of troubles with that, reach out to me. We will talk and we will figure you out. Next week, we're doing semi-Fredo. So some things that you might want to, some things you might want to get there would be cream. Let me pull that up real quick. So you might want to get some eggs and some cream for next week, because you are going to need that for your semi-Fredo. So that way you can kind of try to shop ahead, check with your grocery stores, you know, if they're out of things, call and be like, hey guys, when are you going to get like a produce shipment? When are you getting some eggs in? And the grocery stores are usually pretty good at working with you and finding what you need. So how are you guys feeling? Do we have any last questions before we break away for the evening? I don't see any and I don't hear any, so it has been fun as it always is. And reach out with any questions. Guys, your macarons are due this evening at 11:59 p.m. So make sure you get that in, and then just keep the communication open with me. Have a good night, everybody.